Some stories should never be heard after midnight.
I did a DNA test for fun. 23andMe. Spit in a tube, mail it back, wait 6 weeks. My results came back with one close family match. 48% shared DNA. That means a parent, a sibling, or a child. I don't have siblings. My parents were both tested. Neither of them matched. The profile picture on the match was a woman who looked exactly like me. She died on March 4th, 1991. I was born on September 17th, 1993. So tell me, who is she? I want to be upfront about something before I get into this. I'm a scientist. Not in a braggy way, I mean it as context. I'm a 31-year-old biochemistry researcher at a university lab in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My entire professional life is built around evidence, methodology, and the understanding that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. I do not jump to conclusions. I do not believe in things I cannot test, which is exactly why what I found broke me the way it did. It started as a Christmas gift to myself. I'd been curious about my ancestry for years. My family history on my father's side is murky at best. Lots of gaps and vague answers whenever I asked questions growing up. My mom's side is well documented, but my dad always deflected when the subject came up. Nothing dramatic, just a kind of quiet discomfort I never pushed hard enough to understand. So last December, I ordered a 23andMe kit. Spit in the tube, sealed it up, mailed it back the day after Christmas. 6 weeks later, I got my results email. The ancestry breakdown was interesting but not shocking, largely what I expected. I opened the DNA relatives section mostly out of curiosity. Most people have distant cousin matches, maybe a second cousin if they're lucky. I was hoping for something that might fill in the gaps on my dad's side. There was one match at the top of the list flagged as a close family match. 48.3% shared DNA. For reference, a parent shares roughly 50% with a child. A full sibling shares around 50%. A half-sibling shares around 25%. 48.3% means this person was either my parent, my child, or my full biological sibling. I have no siblings. I'm an only child. I've always been told I'm an only child. The match had a profile, a username, ML_1989, and a small circular profile photo. I clicked to enlarge it. It was a woman, dark hair, heart-shaped face, a specific way of holding her chin slightly down when she smiled that I recognized immediately and viscerally, because I do the exact same thing in every photo ever taken of me. She looked like me, not in a vague family resemblance way, in a way that made my stomach fold in half. I clicked through to whatever limited profile information was available. 23andMe doesn't share much without mutual consent, but there was a small amount of information this person had made public. Name: Margaret Louise Hartley. Location: Detroit, Michigan. Member since 2019. Someone had created this profile in 2019 and never logged in since. No additional information, no family tree, no response to the system-generated match notification that would have gone out when our DNA connected. I Googled Margaret Louise Hartley, Detroit, Michigan. The first result was a digitized newspaper archive from the Detroit Free Press. Margaret Louise Hartley, 24, of Detroit, passed away March 4, 1991, following a brief illness. She is survived by her parents, Robert and Elaine Hartley of Dearborn. I was born September 17, 1993. 2.5 years after Margaret Louise Hartley died. I sat with that for a long time. Long enough that my coffee went completely cold and I didn't notice. Then I put my scientist brain back on and started working through the logical explanations methodically. First possibility: lab error. 23andMe's accuracy is well documented but not perfect. I noted it, set it aside, kept going. Second possibility: A database error or profile duplication. Someone alive had created a profile and the system had somehow attached a deceased person's name to it. Unlikely, but possible. I noted it. Third possibility, the profile was created by a living relative of Margaret Hartley, a parent, a sibling, using her name or in her memory. The DNA in the database was theirs, not hers. The match was real, but the name was a tribute or mistake. This felt the most plausible. I held on to it. I sent a message through the 23andMe platform to the profile. A careful, non-alarming message introducing myself and asking if they'd be willing to connect. No response. The account remained inactive. I contacted 23andMe support directly and explained the situation. They confirmed the account had been created in 2019 and had been inactive since. They could not share any additional user information due to privacy policy. They offered to flag the account for review. I went back to the newspaper archive and dug further. Margaret Hartley's obituary was brief, but led me to a funeral home record that had been digitized as part of a genealogy project. From there, I found a 1990 census record listing Robert and Elaine Hartley at an address in Dearborn with one dependent, Margaret, then 23 years old. Robert Hartley had a listed phone number in a 2003 White Pages archive. It was disconnected now, but gave me a last known address. I found an Elaine Hartley in a 2019 obituary, Margaret's mother. She'd passed at 79. The obituary mentioned she was survived by no children. Margaret had been an only child too. So who created the 23andMe profile? I requested my own raw DNA data file from 23andMe, the actual genetic data, not just the processed results. I'm a biochemist. I can read it. Then I contacted a genetics professor I know at my university and asked her to look at something with me without telling her what I was looking for. She called me 2 hours after I sent the file. Her first words were, "Where did you get this comparison sample?" I told her it was a DNA match from a consumer testing service. There was a pause. "This isn't a sibling match," she said slowly. "The markers are wrong for that. This is closer to what we'd see in..." She stopped. "In what?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. "Identical twins share 100%, she said carefully. "But there are cases, extremely rare, where the DNA profile we're looking at would suggest something closer to..." She stopped again. "Just come to the lab," she said. "Bring everything you have. Don't talk to anyone about this before you come." I drove to the lab the next morning. Dr. Reyes, the genetics professor, met me at the door before I even knocked. That told me everything I needed to know about how she'd spent the night. She had the kind of focused, slightly hollowed look of someone who hadn't slept because a problem wouldn't let them. She'd printed out both DNA profiles side by side, mine and the match from 23andMe. She'd highlighted sections in 3 different colors: yellow, green, red. The red sections were what she kept coming back to. "Sit down," she said. I sat. She pulled up a chair across from me and set the printouts between us like evidence at a trial. "I'm going to explain what I'm seeing," she said, "and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. Can you do that?" I nodded. "Identical twins," she began, "share virtually 100% of their DNA because they originate from the same fertilized egg. Fraternal twins, regular siblings, they share roughly 50% because they come from different eggs. What you have here is a 48.3% match, which on the surface reads as a sibling. But," I said, because there was clearly a but. "But the specific pattern of shared markers is wrong for a sibling relationship. When siblings share DNA, it's distributed in a particular way. Chunks inherited from each parent, alternating, predictable. What I'm seeing in your comparison is different. The shared segments are distributed in a way that's more consistent with..." She tapped the red highlighted sections. a genetic template, as if one profile was derived from the other, not inherited alongside it, derived from it. I stared at the papers. What does that mean? She leaned back, chose her words carefully the way scientists do when they're about to say something that sounds insane. There's a concept in genetics called a source genome. It's theoretical. We don't work with it clinically, but the idea is that in extremely rare cases, a person's complete genetic profile can be replicated isn't the right word, reconstructed in another individual without the standard inheritance process. Not cloning. Cloning produces 100% identical DNA. This is different. This looks like a reconstruction that incorporated natural variation, as if someone used Margaret Hartley's genome as a blueprint and introduced deliberate mutations to create something new. The room was very quiet. "You're describing me," I said. She didn't answer that directly. "I'm describing what the data shows," she said. "I'm not drawing conclusions. I want to be very clear about that." "Who would have access to her genome?" I asked. She died in 1991. DNA testing wasn't consumer available until decades later. "Medical samples," Dr. Reyes said quietly. "Hospitals retained tissue samples routinely for decades. Pathology labs, research institutions. If she'd had any medical procedures, any hospitalization, her genetic material could theoretically still exist in a stored sample somewhere." I thought about the brief illness mentioned in her obituary. I thought about my father's quiet discomfort whenever family history came up. I thought about the fact that he worked for a pharmaceutical research company for 11 years before I was born. Left the year I was born. Never talked about why. I drove home in a state I can only describe as suspended. Not panicked, not calm, just suspended. Like the moment between a glass slipping off a counter and hitting the floor. That night I called my father. I didn't lead with any of it. I asked about his old job first, casually, how he'd gotten into it, why he'd left, the normal questions a curious adult child asks. He answered the way he always did, vaguely, briefly, redirecting. Then I said, "Dad, did you ever know someone named Margaret Hartley?" The silence that followed was 7 seconds long. I counted. "Where did you hear that name?" he said. His voice had changed completely. "DNA test," I said. "She came up as a close family match. She died in 1991, 2 years before I was born. 48% shared DNA." "Dad, who was she?" Another silence, longer. "I need to see you in person," he said finally. Don't look anything else up. Don't talk to anyone. Just come home this weekend. I'll explain everything." "Explain it now," I said. "I can't do this on the phone." "Is she the reason you left your job?" The silence this time was different, heavier. "Yes," he said. "I went home that weekend. My father sat across from me at the kitchen table where I'd done homework as a kid and told me a story that I am still not fully able to process. He told me about a research program he'd been part of in the late 1980s, a genetics project operating inside a larger pharmaceutical company. Theoretical work, he said, nothing that was ever supposed to leave the lab. He was a data analyst. He insisted he hadn't understood the full scope of what they were doing until it was too late. He told me about Margaret Hartley, a young woman who'd enrolled in a clinical trial for an unrelated condition, who had died unexpectedly, whose genetic samples had been retained without her family's knowledge or consent. He told me about the night in 1992 when he found a project file he wasn't supposed to see. He told me about the decision he and my mother had made together afterward. And then he told me something about how I came into the world that made every piece of it lock into place with a sound I felt in my chest rather than heard. I'm not ready to share that part yet. Not because I'm protecting anyone. The people who made those decisions are either dead or beyond accountability at this point. I'm not sharing it yet because I'm still sitting with what it means to be who I am. What it means to be loved completely by people who built you from a grief they were trying to fix. What it means to be real. I know I'm real. I've always been real. But now I understand why Margaret Hartley's profile picture looked exactly like me when she smiled, and why I've never quite looked like my father. I don't know what category this story falls into. Horror, science, family, maybe all three. If this made you feel something, if it made you think about identity, about where we come from, about the things families carry in silence, subscribe. Turn on notifications, because the next story is already written, and it goes somewhere you won't expect. And drop a comment. Do you think I should share the rest of what my father told me? Tell me. Because right now you're the only people I'm talking to about this.